Hello again, and welcome to this interview in the series that is all about empowering a league of extraordinary mothers on how to use the power of food to get more energy, the body we love, and get back that zest for life that we all crave. Today's interview is with Mandy King, who is an holistic nutritionist and the founder of Heal. Her passion is working with health-conscious people who want to stop feeling tired, fix their digestion, and lose weight once and for all. Mandy has made numerous appearances on TV and in leading newspapers and leads wellness programs for large companies such as Google and Facebook. Thank you so much for being with us, Mandy.
Thanks for having me.
I'm excited. I'm excited to get this conversation happening. Can you start with your story and how did you get into the work that you're doing now?
Well, like a lot of people in the health world, I kind of got into it because I was struggling with my own health and couldn't really find answers. After graduating university, I went and worked downtown Toronto at a major company, Unilever, nothing to do with health and wellness. And right around that time, I started to experience these symptoms I'd never had before. So all of a sudden, really upset digestion, really struggling with low energy. For anybody that's kind of not felt their best, they know that also takes a toll on their emotional health as well. And I wasn't happy. I wasn't very happy because just getting through the day-to-day things in life was such a struggle because I felt like such garbage. So I did what any normal person would do, and I went to the doctor and I said, diagnose me, what's wrong with me? He listened to my symptoms and he said, oh honey, you're just stressed.
Yeah.
You just sleep more, or your digestive problems are just IBS, which stands for irritable bowel syndrome, and is kind of this catch-all for unexplained digestive problems. And he said, you're just going to have to live with that. And it was, I was 21 at the time, so I'd never really been ill or seriously like more than a cold or a flu.
Yeah.
So it was really, disappointing news to get. And so what ended up happening is I kind of just left and thought, well, this is sort of how I'm going to have to be. I progressively got worse and went to and from the doctor and finally was diagnosed with celiac disease, which is an autoimmune condition where you're severely intolerant to gluten. So you're not the person that's like, oh, I'd prefer to be gluten-free. Like you have to be because you get really, really sick from even like a crumb of bread. And so changed my diet entirely, still not really being in the health world, but still didn't get better. And so fast forward another 2 years and I was finally diagnosed with a parasite. And it turns out that backpacking in Southeast Asia after university had left me with a friendly parasite.
Yeah.
So a combination of getting diagnosed with celiac and having to totally overhaul my diet to gluten-free, getting diagnosed with a parasite, and then getting over it just through natural ways, through an alternative practitioner, really sparked this interest in the world of health and wellness. And so I went back to school to become a certified holistic nutritionist, and then decided that there was a gap in the market in terms of, you go to work and you don't really think about your health at work. You think about it outside of work, right? But we spend so many of our waking hours at the office or wherever your office is that you can have a huge impact on how you feel. And the interesting thing was, while my main complaint was digestion, what I noticed is now that I was eating better and taking in these tips from nutrition school, all of a sudden my energy was better. And, I never really struggled with weight, but it was very easy to maintain a weight, easier to manage stress. And so there were all these positive side effects that I wanted to kind of take into the corporate world. And so part of my business is corporate wellness. And then the other part is seeing one-on-one clients a lot of the time who come across me from things like this or from being in their office.
Yeah. It's interesting that you bring up parasites again. It seems to become, it's something that people are talking about more and more. It's not something that we used to hear about. Is there just more awareness about it, or people just more confident to say it out loud, or what's going on there?
I think it's more awareness.
Yeah.
And really the interesting thing is you can get a parasite even from being in the country you live in. It's not just when you travel to a third world country, but it's more common when you do that. And so, you could argue maybe people are traveling more, or maybe people are more aware of their symptoms. Like I think 20 years ago, if you had an upset stomach, you just like, oh, it's just part of it, right?
Yeah.
It's just normal. And now it's like, no, with the internet, we know that that's not normal and there's things you can do. So it's probably a little bit of both for why people are finding or talking about it more anyways.
Yeah, it wasn't something that we planned. I planned to talk to you about, but I think it's worth touching on it a bit further for mums. What are some of the signs and symptoms that might alert us to think of that it's a possibility?
Well, parasites, I mean, for me as a practitioner, they're usually one of the last things I look at.
Yeah.
Like usually if someone, so the big things to watch out for are digestion. I mean, if you have IBS symptoms, but a lot of the time those will resolve by removing your food sensitivities or by doing some gut healing work. And then if you still are having symptoms, then maybe I'd look at a parasite. What happened to me and what's a very interesting one is when you lose weight for no reason.
Yep.
And so, I mean, I was about 15 pounds lighter than my normal weight, which was very, very underweight at the time. And I was eating lots. So that was a sign. I had one client who's interestingly, other than digestive issues, she had the red bumps on her arms.
Oh.
Little red dots that kind of look, they're not acne, but they're just inflammation on the back.
We call it chicken skin.
That's what it is. I was trying to think of the word. Chicken skin. And that can just be related to digestive issues in general, but one client had that as well. So when we suspect a parasite, what we'll do is really in-depth stool test that's over and above what you would do at your regular doctor. I interestingly was tested first at my regular doctor and they said, no, there's no parasites. And so they'd missed it because it's just a kind of a high level test and they're not testing as in-depth as this other one is.
Yeah. So if people are thinking that they want to get tested for that, you're better to go to a naturopathic doctor or?
Yeah, naturopaths, some nutritionists offer it.
Yeah.
And then it is a paid test. You have to pay. It's not usually covered by your medical, typically, at least in Canada.
Yeah.
But it's so worth it. And usually the people that need to do it, I mean, they're at their wit's end.
Yeah.
It might have even been years that you're trying to figure out what's wrong. And you cut out gluten or you cut out dairy, but like nothing really changed. Or you added a probiotic, but you're still unwell.
Yeah. So. Okay. All right. Well, we did get off what I was intending to talk about a bit there, but I think it's really worth touching on. All right. So let's go back to energy. On your website, I saw a lovely post that was about 7 natural boosters for all day energy. And that, that was like, ding. Yeah. Yes, please. Can we go through some of those? I don't expect you to remember them all, but, if just some ideas around that would be awesome.
Totally. So the number one change that I'll make with people who want more energy is it might not be a change, but the number one thing I'll look at is their breakfast.
Yep.
Because traditional breakfast foods are typically very carbohydrate rich and don't have enough protein. They might have added sugar, but they're really, most importantly, lacking fat and protein to balance out your blood sugar. And as soon as you haven't balanced out your blood sugar, your energy about an hour after eating, or maybe even less, is going to go like this. It's going to tank. And so that's when you need that coffee or you get that sweet craving mid-morning. So the very first thing I would suggest is having a high protein breakfast. Yep. And I do that with, you could do eggs or you could do a protein shake, a smoothie. But smoothies are nothing new. I know I was actually in Australia last November and you guys have smoothies and juice bars everywhere, and it's same here in Canada, except that they're not all created equal, because you can throw anything into a blender and come out with a smoothie, and they often have a banana, blueberries, a pear, peach, like all in one, right? And so it's important that it's a low fruit smoothie. It's important that you've got the protein powder in there or hemp seeds or some source of protein. Yeah. And I aim for 25 to 30 grams per shake of protein. So it's usually more than people are doing. And then some healthy fats in there too, so chia seed, flaxseed, almond butter, coconut oil, again, to satiate you, but also to keep that blood sugar stable for energy. Yeah. But then there's also some kind of fun ingredients that you can throw in, which is probably the article you're referring to, which would be One of them is maca powder.
Yeah.
So maca is, have you heard of maca before?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's an adaptogenic herb. It's native to Peru or South America. And it isn't like having a coffee where you're like immediately you notice the boost. Maca is a much gentler, gradual boost. So you put about a half a teaspoon into your shake or your oatmeal or whatever you're having for breakfast. I usually start with just every other day. It doesn't have to be every day of the week. But over time, what happens is you notice that it's actually supporting your adrenal glands. And your adrenal glands are really, really important for your hormones and particularly your stress hormones. And so a lot of the time, especially mothers who are exhausted and, working a lot and taking care of the kids and everything, have weaker adrenals or some forms of adrenal fatigue. And maca can really help boost back up that cortisol, giving you good energy. Now you don't do, sorry?
No, we see, maca is easily available here in Australia. I'm sure it is wherever people are listening.
Yeah, and the other thing with maca that I should just mention, since we're talking to moms, is that you wouldn't do it when you're pregnant or breastfeeding.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's a really nice one that you can just add into your shake. Another one that I really like is matcha powder. That's the green tea powder. So instead of having like a bagged green tea, you're actually having the powder mixed in. So it's more potent. But it gives you, so it has caffeine like a coffee, except that it also contains something called L-theanine, which is an amino acid that can cross the blood-brain barrier and give you a relaxing or calming effect. So yeah, you get that boost, but some people from coffee, they feel quite jittery or it worsens their anxiety or whatever. So the L-theanine kind of balances out that caffeine boost that you get in matcha. So
do you have some recipes for this on your website? Is that?
I do, yes.
Yeah.
I have a matcha latte recipe. Matcha is quite bitter tasting on its own, just like a strong green tea would be. Yes. So I usually mix, I put almond or coconut milk and then a little bit of honey or some stevia if you want, and then heat it up and then put it in the blender so it's nice and frothy. It's a little bit of a drink.
You're going to get a sudden burst of hits on that recipe on your website. I'll be looking. Okay, so breakfast, definitely an awesome first step to boosting our energy in the day. So what else is on your list?
So another one you could do is raw cacao powder. So raw cacao is basically the less processed form of cocoa powder or pure chocolate. So no sugar that's added to it. And I have on my website, I have a recipe for a homemade hot chocolate, and you could have it iced. I know you guys are heading more into summer. We're heading into winter, but you can have it iced if you don't need a hot drink. And the nice thing about the raw cacao is that it's a really good source of magnesium. Now, magnesium is typically a calming mineral, but it's also required for your body to produce energy. So it's not like a coffee that's going to give you that instant boost, but it's much more nourishing for your energy. Yeah. The other thing is it does give you a little bit of a boost as you drink it, or you can also mix raw cacao into energy bites, or I have lots of chocolate recipes on my website, so people can see what that is or how to use it in recipes. Yeah. And then I think the other things that I speak about in that article are actually more related to general nutrients. Yep. So the B vitamins are really important for all energy, and the B vitamins work synergistically. So yes, I think we hear the most about B12, right? Because that's tested the most with your doctor, but they're all important. And so food sources of the B vitamins are usually the animal proteins or fish protein, but avocados are a good source. Yams, the leafy greens are really good. For some people, I will recommend actually taking a supplement of the B vitamins, just if I think they're really low energy, and the adrenal glands require a lot of the B vitamins to function properly. So if you think about somebody who's maybe a little burnt out, the B vitamins can really help.
Yep. I always think of Dr. Terry Walls talks about the dark green leafies as being the back vitamins, B, A, C, and K vitamins. That's how I remember it.
Oh, I've never heard that, but that's a great way to think about it.
That's I, have these little things that help me remember which is which.
Yeah. No, I love that.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously food is integral to our ability to have more energy and feel better and, that lasting throughout the day rather than crashing. But I know it's just one piece of the puzzle. Did you want to touch on some other things that you see as important as well?
For sure. I mean, exercise is really important. I'm not a personal trainer, I'm a nutritionist, but I will say that nobody feels worse after exercising. Unless you're in a really burnt out state or you're overdoing your exercise. Other than that, really, like, it's always beneficial. And the interesting thing is, I think we think as a society, like, you've got to be dripping in sweat for it to be like a productive workout, or you've got to get the most bang for your buck in 30 minutes. But going for a walk outside is still going to revitalize you, even if it's a 20-minute walk in the sunshine, And so people end up not following through on their exercise if they're not doing something they like. So my advice is always to be doing something you enjoy, because then you're going to stick with it. And it's the same with eating healthy and exercising, is that it isn't a one-day thing. To get results, you got to do it as more of a lifestyle. So exercise is really important. And then I think the big one that I see, particularly when it's women in their 30s and 40s and beyond, is more of the impact stress has taken. I think in our 20s, like, we can kind of take it and it's okay, because it's usually just the beginning maybe that you've had some stress. But then maybe I don't know if it's family obligations or work or just a combination of everything, that stress can be a real drain on your energy. And at the risk of sounding like a broken record, everybody says, well, you've got to manage your stress. But what I've found to be useful myself is meditation. And I like it because it's literally just 10 minutes a day. And I use an app called Headspace, but there's tons of apps out there that you can try. Calm, Will. I think there's even one built into the iPhone now, I think. So there's lots of different things, and just kind of making sure that there's a balance between being in front of a screen all day and then getting outside or just doing something that you like to do, because that's a real antidote to stress.
Yeah. I find even just putting on the music in the afternoon when the kids are home.
Yeah, that's great.
It's really, it's the incidental stuff. It all just adds up. If I've got to find an hour to go to the gym, so often that just won't happen. It's just the time isn't there.
For sure.
Yeah.
The other thing that's interesting for women with energy is hormones. Because those also change as we change decades and as we age. And I see so many people with a slightly deficient thyroid, but it's not deficient enough for the medical world to say anything about it. They say, oh, it's within the normal range, but they're still symptomatic. So they're still, and typical thyroid symptoms are low energy and having problems losing weight. Those are like the two big ones. And so they're really frustrated because they're like, well, I'm eating decently well, I'm exercising, like nothing's changed in the last 5 years, except for I have less energy and more weight on my body. And so it can be interesting to look, again, and that's a separate test that you can do more in depth, and looking at your full thyroid, your adrenal hormones, and getting a full picture of where everything's at. Because if something is off or a little deficient, that can be the missing piece of the puzzle that, you could spend years wondering what the heck it is.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a light bulb for lots of mums. But when you look at weight management, once you get past that, into that, 40s plus perimenopausal phase, do you actually recommend a different way of eating? Like, is it that you need to adjust quantities of fats and carbohydrates to what you would in your 20s, or?
Well, that's an interesting question, because I think in your 20s, your body can probably handle a little bit more of what you throw at it. But really, it isn't that it should be that different of a diet. It just being because all of a sudden people have to pay attention to it.
Yeah.
What I find with a lot of people is they're underestimating the sugar they're consuming.
Mm.
And it's interesting because, I don't think you should have to go cold turkey for the rest of your life and never eat sugar again. But it can be really interesting to do like a 2-week period or a 4-week period where you do go cold turkey on sugar, because it shows you how many places it's creeping in and how often you're using it for energy. And
Mm.
so when I have clients that can't lose, or say they can't lose weight or having problems losing weight, I will be really strict about sugar for a short period of time so that it's eye-opening for them. And the best part of that is they often drop like 5 or 10 pounds instantly, and they're like, well, I didn't think I was eating that much sugar. And they might not have thought so, but it's creeping into that afternoon snack, or they're having like a healthy dessert every night, but that still might be sugar, even if it's dates or maple syrup or honey. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that can be a really big factor, especially as we age and if we're having problems losing weight kind of into the perimenopause area. Healthy fats are important at all ages, but particularly ground flaxseed can be really efficient for women, or really effective for women, because flaxseed helps eliminate excess estrogen. And so a lot of women, as they hold on to weight, if it's hormonal, it could be because they have an excess estrogen to progesterone ratio, or too much estrogen to progesterone. And that, it's interesting because you can, if you ask somebody where they hold weight, that often tells you what the root cause might be. And with estrogen, if you're holding it more in kind of the upper thighs and bum and hips area, it's usually estrogen related. And so the healthy fats are really important, and particularly ground flax. Whole flaxseed, it just passes right through. But ground flax is really good at eliminating some of that estrogen. So that's a big one that I will use specifically with women in that age group.
Okay. And is it the difference between grinding the flax yourself and buying it pre-ground? Is it, I've heard that once it's pre-ground, it loses a lot of its goodness anyway. Is that?
Yeah. So flaxseed is very high in omega-3s, which are, can be easily damaged from heat, light. What's the other one I'm thinking of? Heat and light.
Oxygen.
Yeah, I think. And so ideally you want to buy it whole, and then you want to grind it and store it in the freezer if you're going to keep it ground.
Yep.
So when you're buying it in the store and it's pre-ground, like, it's not the worst because it's probably sealed. It's probably not in a clear bag. But ideally you do it and you literally grind it in the morning, or if you have a good blender, you throw it in whole and it will grind it in your smoothie.
Yeah. So having it that way, as opposed to buying flaxseed oil, is there a benefit to either? Or?
So there's a difference. The flaxseed oil still has the omega benefits.
Yeah.
And it's it's a healthy oil. You wouldn't want to cook with it because it's, again, like olive oil, it gets damaged with heat.
Yep.
But it doesn't have the fiber that the actual seed does. And so it's partially the fiber that's what's so good for eliminating the excess estrogen. So I would, if you were to choose between one, I'd just choose the ground or the whole flaxseed and grinding it.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. So did we go through the energy list? Maybe if we look at, we've certainly touched on breakfast, but can we look at a morning routine that we can take away and start putting some of these things into practice?
For sure. Yeah. Morning routine. I mean, people don't have a lot of time in the morning, so we got to keep it simple. I think the most life-changing thing you can do in the morning from a routine perspective is to start the day with water.
Yeah.
And it sounds so basic, and I'm sure a lot of people listening are doing it, but a lot of people aren't.
Yeah.
And what you do is you typically wake up and you go straight to your coffee, or you eat breakfast. And if you think about the evening before, chances are you weren't drinking a ton leading up to bed because you didn't want to pee in the night. You weren't drinking while you were sleeping. And so you wake up mildly dehydrated. And even just a 5% drop in hydration levels can lead to a 25% drop in energy. One of the main symptoms of dehydration is fatigue. But instead we think, oh, we're tired, like I'll just have a coffee, and that further dehydrates you. So if you can start the day with 500 milliliters or 2 cups of water before you do anything, that's a really, really good start. And then have your coffee, or then have your tea and breakfast, but just doing that first. Another thing you can do in that morning routine, if you have at all any sort of digestive issues, like a sluggish digestion, or you want the health benefits, you can squeeze some lemon into that water and have lemon water first thing. I notice it's really, really good for keeping clients regular in terms of constipation and digestive system. But it's also really high in vitamin C, which is great. We're heading into our cold and flu season, so extra vitamin C is always beneficial. If there's any way you can get natural light first thing in the morning, so getting outside and getting your eyes kind of in the regular light and not just indoors, that helps set your melatonin routine. And so you'll actually sleep better that night, which of course, if you sleep better, you're going to have better energy. So that's just a really simple one, especially for people that, if you're inside and you go to your garage and then you go straight to the office and you haven't even really been outside much, that can be beneficial. And any sort of movement you can do. So understanding you don't have an hour to go to the gym, you don't even probably have half an hour, but if you could do a 5-minute high intensity routine, so you're doing jumping jacks or you're getting your heart rate going, that's awesome, right? That's going to give you a natural energy boost that isn't just going to last 5 minutes. It's going to last a lot longer.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Those are all good morning routine things to do, I'd say.
With the water, it's interesting at different times. I feel like, you can take in a whole lot of water. Sometimes you feel like you're actually absorbing it, and sometimes it just feels like you're sitting on the loo all day. So what is the difference? How do we make sure that we're actually absorbing that water into ourselves?
Well, typically you can just look at the color of your urine.
Yeah.
And you want it to be a really pale yellow. So if it's a dark yellow, you're dehydrated. If it's completely clear, and you're going to the bathroom all the time, you probably have enough water in your system. Yeah. Like the average, they say, is around 2 liters per person per day. And then, if you are exercising a lot or sweating or pregnant, you need more. But in general, 8 cups or 2 liters is usually a good amount.
Okay. So adding lemon or like apple cider vinegar or something like that, does that actually help us absorb the water better or not?
Not that I'm aware of. It might, I just don't know on that specifically. Yeah. I think it's more related, those two are more beneficial from a digestive standpoint.
Yeah. Okay. So one of the things that has come up in emails that I'm getting is, we're talking about all this real food cooking and how it's important to get more real foods into our diet. But lots of mums actually don't have a love of cooking. Getting in the kitchen is something that we haven't necessarily grown up with, and maybe our mums didn't either. What are some of, if you have a client that comes in who is in that situation, what are some of your tips to making it easy to start putting some of these things into practice?
Well, every client I work with, I give them a meal plan, because then, and they don't have to follow it entirely or 100%, but it at least gives them the ideas, right? Because I think the biggest question moms ask is what's for dinner, or get asked, like, what are we going to eat? And so if you have this guideline, it can just be really helpful and knock off like the question of, well, what am I going to do? And searching for recipes, and then you can't find one that's easy or that kind of thing. So meal plans with a focus on 30-minute dinners or 30-minute main courses. Whenever you're in the kitchen already cooking, make more than you need, because it doesn't take a lot more effort. Like if you're already cooking 3 chicken breasts, why not make 6? And then you cook dinner for the next night. The other thing is that good whole foods don't need to be complicated. I mean, most nutritionists are not chefs, right? And so we know from a nutrition standpoint what to put together. We know how to make it taste good, but it's not going to require hours in the kitchen to make it, I don't know, some braised duck leg or something like that.
No. Yeah, I'm exactly the same. I think probably 90% of what I cook during the week goes in one pot. I know that I want this quantity of veggies and some protein and some fat, and it goes in and it goes in the oven. I do a lot of slow cooks, anything that just gets that nutrient in, but it's got to be quick and easy. There's no marinating for 3 hours or not during the week.
Totally. And I find, I don't know if you guys have the Instant Pot in Australia. If you come across it.
Instant Pot, is that like a slow cooker or what's a?
Well, it's basically like a slow cooker. It's a pressure cooker.
Okay.
But take slow cooker recipes and make them much faster.
Okay.
And it's very hands off again. And because it's a pressure cooker, like the end result is still really juicy and delicious and the flavors are good. And I'm always blown away, both with my slow cooker and now the Instant Pot, because I have both now, are like you don't need to add much seasoning or spices, and because it cooks in a certain way, it gives it more flavor than a typical dish would. So those are nice gadgets to have.
Yeah, and I completely subscribe to that. You know, you don't need to come up with fancy sauces and things. If you're using beautiful fresh ingredients, the flavors are just fantastical by themselves. But I think it probably does require a change in our palate if you're used to a lot of sugars and a lot of salts, and just requires a bit of transition, I guess.
Yeah, that's interesting you should say that, because even just like eating an apple, when you're eating a lot of processed sugars, an apple doesn't taste that sweet. And then when you cut out that sugar, if you do it for a period of time, all of a sudden an apple is so sweet. You're like, wow, this is amazing. And so the same thing happens with fresh vegetables and whatever, 30-minute dinner you're making, is it's actually really good, and it's not that fancy, and there's not that many ingredients in there.
Yeah. I find when I'm talking to clients, the quality of the fruit and veg makes such a massive difference. A tomato that's been in cold storage for the last, year or two versus something that you've plucked out of your garden that's warmed in the sun, the flavor could not be more different. It's,
I know. When you have farmers markets you can go to, it makes a world of difference.
Yeah. So you've got farmers markets as well?
We do. From about April to, May, I guess, to October. And then other than that, I mean, you'll get some like winter squash and that kind of thing, but really you have to rely on either frozen or getting stuff that's from California or isn't super local and fresh.
Yeah. We get Californian oranges in our supermarkets. I've seen them. All right, so maybe can you share with us your favorite go-to breakfast?
Oh yeah, sure. So my favorite, I'll give you two. My favorite is, I call it my fave smoothie recipe, and it's actually up on my website, is a cup of water, a tablespoon of flax, tablespoon of almond butter, a cup of frozen berries, a handful of spinach, and a scoop of vanilla protein powder.
Okay.
That's it. And it tastes great every time. Consistency's good. You could always add that maca or the raw cacao powder if you wanted to. And then another one that I also really like, if I've prepped ahead for the week, so if I'm using my own meal plans, let's say, I will have made something like egg muffins, where you can make them in advance and then literally grab and go. And so I'm not sure if I'm going to remember every ingredient, but we have a recipe up on the blog that's this is in the meal plans, broccoli and egg muffins. So what you do is you chop up some broccoli into little pieces and steam it for 5 minutes. And then in a bowl, you put 8 eggs, broccoli, some chopped sun-dried tomatoes, because that makes everything fancier and more delicious, a little bit of almond milk, and some Italian seasoning. I think that's everything. Whisk it up and then put it in a muffin tray, or put them in muffin trays and bake it at 350 for about 30 minutes. And then you've got these little egg muffins, high protein, you're getting veggies at breakfast, and literally you can grab and go. The other thing is you can also use them as snacks too. So that's kind of an
I'm thinking lunch boxes, kids' lunch boxes.
Yeah, for sure. Totally.
With the protein powder, is there something, there's better and worse, or what do you look for when you're buying a protein powder?
I always buy, well, for the most part, I buy a plant-based one.
Yep.
So the most common protein powders on the market are whey-based, which is cow's dairy. And so many people have sensitivities or allergies to cow's dairy. And especially too, when it's something you're having frequently, you know, if you're having it once in a blue moon, no problem. But I usually try to get clients to avoid that. So usually a combination of a rice protein powder, bean, hemp, it depends, like every brand, their mix is a little bit different, but the key thing to note is when it says like it's a rice protein or a bean protein, they've extracted the protein from the actual rice. So it's not a starchy product. It's almost entirely protein. So I will look for something that has around 20 grams per scoop, 20 to 25, and then maybe have like a scoop and a bit to get up to that 25 to 30 grams of protein. You want to look and make sure there's very little added sugar in there. Typically there's not a lot, like they're typically sweetened with stevia or monk fruit, which are okay to use as sweeteners. And then it sort of depends on people's flavor profile and preferences. Some protein powders taste very chalky, others are smoother. And so it's a little bit about trying different ones to see what you like.
Yeah. I'd like to just, in the last few minutes that we have, I'd love to just go back to, you talked about that little challenge that you give clients to go off sugar altogether for a week or two. That's, when you were talking about our prevalence of juice bars here in Australia, which they are, and they're very, there's a lot of marketing that makes them sound incredibly healthy, but they're not always. Going sugar-free for a couple of weeks takes a fair amount of understanding of what to avoid and what to look for. Can you, I think there'll be some mums who are going, okay, I'm going to give this a go. Can you give us some guidelines around things to watch out for?
Yeah. I mean, the biggest, I think, misconception about sugar is when something says like organic cane sugar on it. Like, oh, that sounds like it's the better form of sugar. That's just a fancy way of saying sugar. Regular sugar is cane sugar. That's the first thing. Anything that says cane, whether it's cane syrup, cane juice, cane sugar, get rid of that.
Yep.
You will be shocked at, your ketchup, your any sort of marinades or sauces that you bought and didn't make at home probably have sugar. Salad dressings, packaged like protein bars. A lot of the time we buy a protein bar because we're like, oh, okay, it's got the protein. It's got to be good for me. And when you flip it over and you read the label, there's like as much sugar as there is protein.
Yeah.
So when we talk about removing sugar, it isn't totally just about looking at the grams on the packaging or on the nutrition label, because natural sugars are okay, right? There's sugar in beets. Well, we're not going to say don't eat beets.
Yeah.
But it can, when it's a packaged food, it can be interesting to not only look for cane sugar, but also to look at the grams in the product.
Yeah.
The other thing, if we're really going for it, I will also recommend they cut out the natural like maple syrup and honey just for this period of time, right? Because metabolically, it still does the same thing.
Yeah.
So it's not quite as inflammatory. It has like a little bit more nutrition than cane sugar. But if we're talking about weight and energy, still kind of does the same thing to your body. And so we'll cut those out too, even coconut sugar. And I think I've actually got a blog post on 24 foods that are high in sugar that you wouldn't have expected.
Okay.
And that one can be an interesting one for people to read.
Yeah. Yeah. I think what I'm hearing is the easiest way to do this is avoid anything that comes in a packet. And that's a challenge in itself, isn't it?
I mean, not to sound like a broken record, but that's why if you have a plan and you have a meal plan, so we'll usually give them a meal plan to follow, so that they're not like, okay, well, everything I used to eat, I can't eat. We don't want you to feel like that.
Yeah.
Don't give them what the recipes are. And then you're like, oh, wow, I just ate the whole day with no sugar and I didn't even realize it.
Yep. I think that segues into beautifully into a very generous gift that you have for our audience. Would you like to tell them what that is?
Yes, yeah. So we're giving away a 1 week meal plan to everybody. The meal plan is gluten-free and dairy-free to begin with, in case people have sensitivities. There's no refined sugar in there. There's a tiny bit of maple syrup in one recipe, but that's it.
Yep.
If they're wanting to go sugar-free, it's a great way to start. If they just want more energy or maybe have digestive issues, again, following this meal plan for a week can be really, really eye-opening.
Yep.
So I would say people always ask, well, is it like a certain diet? Not really. It's just whole foods. It probably is closest to paleo, but it's not fully paleo. And so hopefully people will really enjoy that and find it useful.
Oh, I'm dying to have a look. I know one thing that does often trip people up is the difference between maple syrup and maple flavor, and people can so looking for that pure maple syrup, which is Canadian usually.
You can get it from Canada.
Thank you so much for your time today. I've loved this conversation, and I know that people are going to want to check out your blogs. Where's the best place for them to go?
I'm at healthyeatingandliving.ca. That's the website. And then they can also find me on Instagram, which is the same. It's at healthyeatingandliving.ca. Or if you search Mandy King, you'll probably also come across me that way too.
You did so well to get that name. The fact that it becomes Heal is perfect. Very impressed when I saw that.
I was very lucky.
You did well. Did you get that a while ago, or?
Well, the trick, no, I got it about 5 years ago, I'd say. But the trick is that it's not .com, it's .ca.
Ah,
a little bit popular.
It's a great name. I love it. I love it. Thank you so much, Mandy. This has been just a wonderful conversation, and I'm really looking forward to sharing it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right. Bye for now.
Bye.